I was not the first employee that Harold Jantz hired in the months before Christian Week newspaper began its life as a print publication back in 1987. He already had a designer, Ray Dirks, who's here, and Harold's wife, Neoma, worked as a bookkeeper and front desk person and did everything, and I'm not 100% sure whether she was an employee or she just did it. But the work got done. I got the assistant editor job because I was available and affordable. And my first assignment was to paint the suite of offices. Early on, I learned that Christian Week was a risky venture from a financial perspective. That didn't matter. I was fresh from an African missionary experience and considered material deprivation a spiritual asset. So I leaped into the project full steam ahead, and it was only as the years passed that I realized what a burden it is to be operationally responsible for an enterprise that was always going to be close to the edge. Over the years, my sense of dependency grew. We needed writers, sales agents, advertisers, support staff, graphic arts designers, board members, donors, subscribers. If only we could have found more of the latter. The Christian Week staff did our best with what we had, and it's a credit to many people that the newspaper survived in print for as long as it did. And while I believe that the entity that birthed Christian Week has positive potential for the future, tonight I mostly want to look backward and pay special homage to the behind-the-scenes people who kept the project going and made the business work, especially those who filled the publisher role. Harold Jantz was the founding editor and publisher of Christian Week, serving in both roles for 10 years. He was my colleague and mentor. We worked well together, and I learned much from him and through the opportunities that the position opened up for me. Among other things, he inspired me with a vision for the church that transcended our various institutions and embraced the people of God in all our multifaceted array. He encouraged me with words to the effect that Christians can live with confidence that God is more than able to meet the brokenness that we encounter in this world. And he gets his own spot in the program in a few minutes, so I'll just leave it there for now. I became editor in 1996. And later that year, Doug MacLeod came on as publisher. If Harold was best characterized by the plain, sturdy, workaday shoes he customarily wore, Doug came sporting flashy Nikes. He had energy and ideas. He was in a hurry. And we posted the first Christian Week website in 1996. We did a graphic redesign of the newspaper, and in 1997 launched a Christian community newspaper in southern Manitoba, Christian Lifestyle. That particular experience was very short-lived, and we barely managed to survive a debt crisis. Neil Jansen succeeded Doug, stepping in on an interim basis to help us recover and refocus. As we navigated these transitions, we relied heavily on our board and broader constituency of readers and writers and donors. Thank you all. We survived. Neil steadied the ship, so to speak, and positioned us for a new entrepreneur leader. Enter Bramwell Ryan, a journalist and communications specialist with a Salvation Army pedigree. During Bram's tenure, the old downtown building that had been our space throughout the early years was shutting down, and we had to move. Our next home was in a century-old house near the Manitoba Legislature, where I enjoyed a lovely office. But during those years, we experimented briefly with preparing newscasts for television. We relaunched Christian Week in a broadsheet format, a much bigger paper than we'd been producing. Bram organized an aggressive national telemarketing subscription campaign that generated interest from tens of thousands, but only produced about 600 subscriptions. You get the picture? We were always looking for ways to make the business more solvent. And while my primary interest was always on the editorial side of the operation, the publishers were left to deal with the business equation. Thank God for them. It could often be a thankless task. It was not an easy job, and it demanded, I believe, a sense of calling. Bram was able to forge an arrangement with our next publisher, David Visser, who ran a printing and publishing company out of Belleville, Ontario. He envisioned Christian Week as a key player in a national Christian communications network and was willing to bring some capital to the table. This, too, proved to be an energetic time of new ideas and fresh inspiration, and as a staff, this was our first experience with a publisher who was not visibly present most of the time. The tinkering continued. The print publication reverted to the tabloid format. We launched free regional publications, Christian Current, in 3 places in Ontario as well as Manitoba. These were distributed to churches who made them available to their congregations. We moved from the century-old house by the ledge to a space on Logan Avenue. And with all the activity, it soon became clear that the Winnipeg office needed more direct business oversight, and that's when Brian Koldyke joined the operation as group publisher. Brian now stands as the longest tenured publisher of Christian Week, at the helm for nigh on 15 years. Congratulations, I think. Brian has had the difficult task of managing a newspaper in an era where costs have escalated and revenue streams dried up. People now communicate in other ways. Online is convenient and often free. The price of print is prohibitive. Advertisers have migrated elsewhere, and subscriptions, a vanishing species. Still, it didn't stop us from trying. We moved into custom publishing, crafting special publications for the Canadian Bible Society, Promise Keepers, and others. In the quest for readers and revenue, we sought collaboration, sponsors, and advertisers. We partnered with Arrow Leadership Ministries, the Bridgeway Foundation, the Canadian Council of Christian Charities, to identify and highlight 35 emerging Christian leaders, 35 years of age or younger. And for that project, we produced and distributed 35,000 copies of a magazine. We were always trying something: website upgrades, new logo and design, eventually a new format, and meanwhile, managing the distribution of more than 40,000 copies of newspapers throughout Ontario and Manitoba was no picnic. Brian was steady, sacrificially accepting responsibilities on the fiscal and operational side while encouraging the editorials to be creative and productive. After 25 years as a Christian Week employee, I left in January 2012. I felt I'd had my opportunity in this field and was ready for something else. Today, the Christian Week that I knew is no longer around, and that's okay. It served its season. It leaves a track record, a chronicle of Christian faith and life in Canada at the turn of the millennium, and part of tomorrow's proceedings will detail more about what that may be worth. For now, it's enough to know that the same organizational platform that carried Christian Week still stands. As a debt-free, registered Canadian Christian media charity with news-gathering legacy, Fellowship for Print Witness is well positioned to assist in developing the next generation of faith-based media in Canada. So, to all the brave souls who shouldered the responsibilities of keeping the Christian Week enterprise going, I offer my deepest thanks. And I firmly believe that an untold number of former subscribers and readers are grateful as well. Thank you most kindly.
Thank you, Doug. I realize I failed to introduce myself. My name's John Longhurst. I'm the religion columnist and reporter at the Winnipeg Free Press. In 1978, a young man walked into Harold Jantz's office and said he wanted a job as a journalist. And for some crazy reason, Harold decided that he would hire him. And now, 40 plus years later, here I am. I am the person that Harold took a chance on in 1978, and my life has never been the same. And I have told Harold that story many times and shared it publicly, and it continues to be something that's very important to me. But my story would be told by many people, perhaps not in the same way, but Harold has been an inspiration, a mentor, an encourager, a supporter of Canadian Christian journalism and of Canadian Christian journalists. A lot of people got their start, including Lorna. Did you not also write for Christian Week way back when? Yes. So many of us had a chance to see our names in print in Christian Week because Harold Jantz took a chance on us and asked us to report for him. So Harold, we'd like to invite you to come up and share about your time at Christian Week and what that meant to you. Please, Harold.
Thank you, John. It was one of my college teachers who asked me whether I would consider becoming editor of the Mennonite Brethren Herald. That took me out of a high school classroom and into an editorial office. That was in 1964. I loved it, even though I worked too hard and unfairly for my family, because I was editing a weekly paper all alone, caring for everything: content, advertising, layout, subscriptions, and I'd not even learned proper typing. The first time I began talking about involvement in a national evangelical publication was in 1969. You can check my board minutes. But it wasn't until 1984 that I really declared my intentions. I told my board I would be leaving, and in 1985 I stepped down and began the process of preparing to publish a trans-denominational newspaper with a clear evangelical bias. My dream was to make it a weekly paper, even if we couldn't afford to do so at the outset. Hence the name. I thought that my own background, with strong roots in an evangelical tradition, and one, I believed, with a social conscience, would allow us to gain the trust of people across the evangelical spectrum, if not within the wider community. It was clear to me that the governing board would need to come from a range of denominations. I wanted the paper to speak to and for evangelicals. It should create a platform for us to get to know one another better, and so to build trust. It should be a paper of record. It should portray us truthfully. It should allow us to write for one another with the evangelical faith understandings that were shaping us. Right from the outset, we had the goal of using Christian Week to make the views and understandings of evangelicals known to others too, who were themselves opinion shapers. As much as possible, we tried to get copies to people in the media and to legislators, for example. We looked for writers with competence and understanding, the ability to articulate and put forth ideas and positions well, and who were genuinely people of faith in Jesus Christ in the spirit of evangelical Christianity. Christian Week could never have materialized if others had not come alongside. The first person I consulted was a person who had been my student in high school and was now a lawyer in Winnipeg. I knew I would need legal advice and help. When I spoke to him, and I'll tell you, I was shaking when I did. But when I spoke to him, his immediate response was positive, and he became part of my first board. I never got a bill from Ed Borkington. I don't know who first told me about John Bonk, but he was only the first of a number of Providence College and seminary people, and I should also name Sarah Passasio there, people who became key key members of the Christian Week board. Without John's advice, I'm not sure I would ever have learned about Doug Koop. Doug has been an irreplaceable part of the story of Christian Week. With his writing, organizational, and memory gifts, his signature is all over this paper. I used to think that this man has a mind like a steel trap. It was a privilege to work with Doug. We didn't need an index as long as Doug was there, because if we asked about a certain article, he could always tell us where it had appeared, and sometimes the very page on which it had appeared. It was a privilege to work with him. There were so many people who enriched us besides the two board members I've already mentioned and editors. There was Wally Craker, who became part of our first board. And then there were others who came alongside us. People from Regent College like Ward Gask, or the Baptist Union's Roy Bell, or Acadia Divinity College's Andrew McCrae, or Franklin Piles of the Christian and Missionary Alliance, and the United Church pastors like Alan Churchill, or Wing Mac of this city, Wendy Tibbetts, and Brian Kelly from this city. And who can forget that fountain of unforgettable sound bites, John Stackhouse? These were people who enriched us hugely. For me, the opportunity to work alongside people of skill and commitment was a gift that has blessed me to this day. I was always impressed by the way Deborah Feguth could work up to a deadline and produce a solid story that hung together in every way. Over the years, we've had a number of great staff writers like Aaron Epp and Gerard Peters, designers like Ray Dirks or Don Monkman, people who took charge of advertising, starting with a retired high school principal, Menno Martins, and including Brian Rimple or Julie Dykstra, or who could forget the irrepressible Sandra Brown at the typesetting keyboard when she found something that was just a bit above her tolerance level. We would hear, "I can't believe this." And I will not forget my own wife and partner, Neoma, whose humor as well as good record keeping we all enjoyed. And there was Bram Ryan, and I too would like to acknowledge the huge commitment made by Brian Koldek, who for years has literally sustained Christian Week to this day. Starting Christian Week was the challenge of my life, and while I lament that it has not survived in a print edition, although I will not give up hope that it will one day be resurrected, I do not for a moment regret the decision to make the start. Developing the network of writers and columnists that filled its pages was a wonderful experience. We got to know many fine writers and connected with people across the Canadian Christian community. That was actually the easy part. And I'll never forget the first meeting we had, Lorna, there in Rostern, Saskatchewan. Lorna was responsible for one of the toughest stories that we ever carried. And if you want to find out about it, you'll have to talk to her. Selling people in leadership across Canada on the worth of a paper such as the one we wanted to be was more of a challenge. I'll never forget a visit to Vancouver and to Regent College when they were still in portable structures, and the warm reception I got there. They got the idea I had for the paper. From there, I went to a nearby institution, and it was like stepping from a warm bath to a cold shower. Who would be interested in reading news like that was one of the questions put to me. Similar responses happened when I asked for the financial support we critically needed. In Regina, on one visit, I got a very friendly reception in one office. But there was someone else I wanted to see in the city, but all of my efforts were fruitless. I'd gone to college with this person's brother, and it had actually worked for another brother. I knew this family, but it eventually became clear to me that this person did not want to see me. That evening, as I lay in bed and reflected on the day, I started asking myself why I needed to put myself through such humiliating experiences. But experiences of that kind were more often replaced by others, where I was treated with respect and generosity. We could not have survived without significant donors. And I'll acknowledge the DeFair Foundation here, or Arthur Block in Vancouver, or Max Monday from that city, and many, many donors who gave lesser amounts. Nor will I ever forget the affirmation I got from Howard Bentall, who was the conference minister for the Baptist Union of Western Canada. When I visited him, I had produced a brochure to explain what we wanted to do. It did not overstate our goals, and he told me how he liked it, how good that affirmation felt, and he remained a friend to the paper. Nor will I ever forget the experience of selling one of our first subscriptions. It was to a friend. Now, we started off our very first issue on April the 1st, 1987. I don't know how it just happened to be that, but it was. And I truly could not say with confidence that we would survive our first year. Could I sell a subscription in good conscience to this friend? Now, this might sound strange to you, but I will tell you that selling that subscription was a struggle for me. One of the many rewarding experiences of the years working with Christian Week came at an EFC conference in Regina. We were in a large conference room with probably 60 or 70 representatives of many denominations seated at tables around the perimeter of that room. I scanned that group, and I could see that nearly all of them had been in our pages. We had helped make them known to one another. This was a reason that we existed. It was also very rewarding to have the American church historian Mark Knoll refer to Christian Week in Christianity Today and state there how helpful we had become in shedding light on Christianity in this country. I won't say more. Working with Christian Week, working with a group of people who were eager to write and engage with both the light and the shadow sides of the church in this country, always with a sense that God was at work in them, and always with a sense that we could be part of his project in this world, was a tremendous privilege. It filled me with joy then, and it fills me with joy to this day.